Good evening to all those members of NOBCO and NABCO who have gathered with us this evening to discuss the state of democracy in America. This conversation is oh so timely because you can look around from state to state in this United States of America and wonder whether the words of the founders that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Through the dark times of slavery and through the growing times of Jim Crow, we as a people embraced those words, even though we knew that when they were written, they did not pertain to us. But we have worked hard and we have had faith that if we just voted, that if we just held America's feet to the fire, we could create a more perfect union. Some people would say that we have now arrived. But as we look across America and we see voter suppression bills being passed state by state, we just dodged a serious bullet over the weekend in Texas with the most stringent voter suppression bill in the nation. We dodged that bullet because the Democrats in our House of Representatives got up and walked out and deprived the Republican majority of the quorum that they needed to pass that legislation. But it's not dead. It'll come up again. And what do we do then? We must have these conversations so we will know whether the institutions that we have established to undergird our sojourn in America are still valid. We must have these conversations so that we can reaffirm that democracy is not dead. It may be on life support. We may need to learn how to give it some artificial respiration. But I don't believe that it's dead. So let's get into the meat of this discussion. It is my privilege to introduce Professor Eddie S. Gload, Jr. Brother Dr. Eddie Glode is an intellectual who speaks to the complex dynamics of the American experience. His most well-known books, Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, and In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism and the Politics of Black America, take a wide look at Black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges our democracy face. He is an American critic in the tradition of James Baldwin, Ralph Waldo Emerson. In his writings, the country's complexities, vulnerabilities, and the opportunities for hope come into full view. Hope that is, in one of his favorite quotes from W.E.B. Du Bois, not hopeless, but a bit unhopeful. He is the James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor and Chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton. He is the former president of the American Academy of Religion. His books on religion and philosophy include An Uncommon Faith, a pragmatic approach to the study of African American religion. African American religion, a very short introduction, and Exodus. Religion, Race, and Nation in Early 19th Century Black America. This brother's a public intellectual, and he is ours. And I can't wait to hear what Dr. Eddie Glode has to tell us this evening about democracy.
Thank you so much, Chairman Brooks, for that gracious introduction. I'm so delighted to be with you. I'm so delighted to be a part of this conversation. You know, with that introduction, I wish my mama was here so she could hear it. You know, that's a testament to her. I want to thank Dr. Holton and everyone, Mr. Houston, everybody who, Brother Ellis, everyone who's Brother Harper, Sister Sawyer, Bishop McKenzie. You know, when you start naming people, you get in trouble. But I want to thank everybody for being here and for making this possible. I want to also lift up the people behind the scenes, the invisible labor that make this kind of virtual environment possible. Even though we are online, there's still some folks doing work that we don't see. And we want to lift them up because without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now. One of my favorite quotations by W.B. Du Bois comes out of that chapter in Souls of Black Folk entitled Of the Passing of the Firstborn. So when Du Bois says a hope, right, not hopeless, but a bit unhopeful, here he's invoking a blues sensibility of people who have come through a set of conditions that suggest that, you know, the possibility of getting beyond the cruelty and the absurdity of now may not be in view, but there's something about, right, a certain kind of faith, a certain kind of commitment that allows one to see beyond the opacity of one's condition. But, you know, it's not a naive hope, it's not a naive faith. It's a kind of B.B. King formulation. Nobody loves me but my mother, and she could be jiving too, you see. I want to begin with that blue note, that blue sensibility, precisely because the country is at a crossroads, to use an old Robert Johnson metaphor. We're at a crossroads. We're at a moment where it feels as if the country is in profound crisis, in a moment of profound transition. Let's be clear. Studies have already come down the pike that American democracy has gone to the wayside. Just a few years ago, we had a study saying that America had transitioned from a democracy to an oligarchy, right? Precisely because big money had overwhelmed, right, the polity. Just in 2006, we had a study about North Carolina. It said it was no longer a democratic state, given what the state Republican Party had done. So let's be very, very clear that American democracy has been on life support for a while, right? For a while. So America is changing. And the substance of that transformation, at least for me, isn't clear. I know this is, Dr. Holton, this is high church, so I'm gonna try to get us back on time, right? Is that okay? I don't want us to lose the time, right? There we go. Right,
Come
so
on, bring it.
the nation is transforming, but who we will be has not yet come into view. What remains in the midst of this transformation, in this crossroads, are the shards, right, of what has been shattered. And people are cleaving to old ideas and to their illusions. Tammy, you know a little bit about this. Cleaving to their old ideas and to their illusions, and some of us are getting cut. We cut ourselves against the sharp edges of their passions, you see. So here we are in this moment. At any moment when the country finds itself at a crossroads where it can imagine itself otherwise, it doubles down on its ugliness. I'm gonna give you two historical coordinates really quickly. So we can think about the second founding, the second founding. The second founding happens in the context of the Civil War and radical Reconstruction. And here we have the birth, as historians call it, of the modern US nation state. Right? It gives us the Civil War amendments, 13th, 14th Amendments. We untether citizenship from race. We get due process. What do we get in response to this genuine attempt to build a multiracial democracy? We get Jim Crow. Frederick Douglass lives long enough to see Abraham Lincoln sign the Emancipation Proclamation and the states of Mississippi and Tennessee to pass the first Jim Crow laws. He would describe the people who embraced the lost cause as the apostles of forgetfulness. What else did we get in response to radical Reconstruction? We got convict leasing, what historians call another form of slavery, where Black folk who have been introduced to the body politic, transformed from enslaved people and brought into a notion of citizenry, are reduced to subsistence, right? Second class, third class citizenship, another form of slavery, evidenced in the material conditions of Black life. But let's not keep it in the South. What else did we get in response to radical Reconstruction? I'm looking at my time. Of radical Reconstruction, we got the ideology of Anglo-Saxonism. That wasn't the possession of the South. That actually was the justification for US imperial ambition abroad at the very moment in which we're consolidating a racial regime in the South. We're annexing the Philippines, bringing millions of people of color under US rule at the very moment in which we're consolidating the idea that white people ought to be valued more than others. Our export isn't just baseball. That's just one historical example. At the moment in which the nation tries to imagine itself otherwise, it doubles down on this belief that white people must matter more than others. And it instantiates practices that then, right, organize the body politic that leads to the distribution of advantage and disadvantage, not only in the courts with Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which isn't overturned in 1954, right? But we see it in the very ways in which space is organized, in the very ways in which how can benefit and burdens of citizenship are deployed. I could tell you a little bit more about it, but I'm gonna go to the second coordinate. The second coordinate is what historians call the second Reconstruction. The mid-20th century, the attempt to fulfill the broken promises of the first. You know, we talk about the 1619 Project. We talk about, this story of America's beginnings. We should start there, as opposed, some say 1619, some will argue 1865, some will say 1954. The late political theorist Judith Sklar says 1965. Said before the Voting Rights Act was passed, America was a hair-invoked democracy. We're only 56 years beyond that, aren't we? What did we get in response to the second Reconstruction? We got calls for law and order, and that wasn't just simply a Republican story. Calls for law and order put in place the building blocks of what would become the carceral state that would lead to the incarceration of millions of Black folk, millions of Americans, the devastation of Black and brown communities and the like, right? What else did we get? We got the tax revolt in Northern California, which led to the shredding of the social safety net, the basic assumptions informing the New Deal. Didn't we get that? What else did we get? We got the election of Richard Nixon twice. Twice. What was the response to King's murder in Memphis, Tennessee? It wasn't a holiday, it was the election of Richard Nixon, right? What else did we get? We got the Hard Hat Rebellion in 1970. We got the violence of anti-busing demonstrations in Boston, right? We got the country doubling down on its ugliness, so much so that it elected Ronald Reagan in 1980 to undo it all. At the very moment in which a new America is trying to be born, the umbilical cord of white supremacy is wrapped around the baby's neck, choking the life out. There's a quotation from Jimmy Baldwin that I'm always reminded of. One more minute, if you don't mind. Baldwin says that the horror of America is that America changes all the time without ever changing at all. The horror is that America changes all the time without changing at all. Here we are in a moment of crisis, in a moment of crossroads, where a new America is trying to be born, where we have these demographic shifts and we see that the polity is collapsing, that government doesn't seem to work, the deliberative body is broken, the so-called House of Representatives have been gerrymandered in such a way that it no longer represents the folk, right? We've been crying out loud, shouting out loud that an imperial presidency presented a danger to the polity. If we had somebody who came into office who didn't believe in democracy with the imperial presidency in place, that they would jeopardize the whole thing. Some of us were screaming this with President Obama. Some of us were screaming it before Obama. And then when Clinton, whatever his name is, Trump got in, we saw what happened, right? So here we are in this moment trying to imagine ourselves anew. And what are we hearing in the wind? We're hearing a reassertion of the lie. They don't want us to tell the story. They don't want us to tell the truth. They don't want us to confront our ghosts. They don't want us to confront those ghosts that threaten to choke the life out of this democracy. But I'm reminded again of this moment, and I'll shut up here. Baldwin in The Price of the Ticket. I love this quotation. He says, in the church I come from, quote, we were counseled from time to time to do our first works over. I think that's second chapter of Revelation, verse 5. We were counseled to do our first works over. To do your first works over, Baldwin writes, means to re-examine everything, to go back to where you started or as far back as you can, examine all of it, travel your road again and tell the truth about it, sing or shout or testify or keep it to yourself, but know from whence you came, end quote. And it is this call, this demand in this moment of crisis that calls us to our work. If we're to engage in a third founding, we must tell the truth about where we are now and those folk who are clinging to an idea that white people ought to be valued more, and they are willing to throw this experiment away on behalf of that commitment. We have to tell the truth, not tinker around the edges if democracy is to be saved. I went over about 3 minutes. Sorry, Dr. Holt. Apologize, y'all.
Woo! You know, Professor Glaud, we could listen to you for all of our time, but as our time is limited, we're going to go forward and to just thank you for such riveting message to get us on this way. I believe we're living through one of the most volatile and divisive times in our nation's history. And in conversations beyond the commentary of CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and other outlets, how many of us are asking ourselves every day, is our democracy irreparably broken? You tell us that it's not, but it's how did we get here and what will it take to repair? And so what we did was we gathered some of the brightest and sharpest minds around today to discuss this issue. Members from our own organization and members who belong to the public with the messages and the voices they bring to ignite in us a spark to do better. But I think when I think of all of this, it's like the Sankofa bird that we must really look to our past to gain perspective and find ways to move forward and to begin again. So if you're looking for a good summer read, I just have to put a shout out. Professor Glaud, your book, Begin Again. should be on everyone's summer reading list. In print, e-reader, or audibly, you can get it in. And I did it in record time. And oh, what a joy. I've not been as captivated as I was in reading your book from cover to cover in quite some time. And I want to take this time now to introduce our panelists for this evening. Mr. Hill Harper, actor, author, humanitarian, philanthropist, just coming off the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial. We also are joined by Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie, the 117th elected and consecrated Bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and the one who shattered the stained glass ceiling for women in ministry. Mr. Lamel McMorris, a founder and CEO of Phase 2 Consulting that's no stranger to what's happening in our capital today. To Supervisor Holly Mitchell, serving the 2nd District as a member of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors and currently holding the post of Vice Chair. And then we have Commissioner Tammy Sawyer from Shelby County, Tennessee in her first term, who led the hashtag Take 'em Down 901 movement in her hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. And Commissioner Van Turner of Shelby County in his 2nd term. And a little known fact to many that is a brewing hot spot today, even as we speak, he's the landowner of where the final remains of Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife thought they would rest in peace forever, only to find themselves being relocated to points outside of Memphis and outside of Shelby County, even as we speak. And at the conclusion of our robust discussion, we would be remiss not to hear from Mr. Derek Albert, NOBCO scholarship recipient, board member, and vice president of our Economic Development Committee. He is the visionary and the organizer of tonight's program. More from him later. And bringing up the rear to close us out will be Commissioner Rodney Ellis from Harris County, Texas. He's the current president of our membership organization, the National Association of Black County Officials, who has been through almost every cycle of local and state government that one can experience in the role of elected. And we will hear from him to close us out this evening. Mr. Harper, your comments that you'd like to share with us tonight.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. And Dr. Glau, thank you for that beautiful presentation. I'm speaking to you now from looking out a window that overlooks the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And been here since Saturday. And I just want to take this time to speak from the heart about this experience. Had the opportunity to sit with 107-year-old mother Viola Fletcher and 105-year-old Uncle Red. At the same time, my son, who's 5 years old, was playing and running around maybe a little too much. And his mother Fletcher looked me in my eye on the left and said, "Baby, they don't care about us. We got to take care of each other." And I saw in my right, out of my right eye, me trying to stop my son from bumping up against Uncle Red because he was running around. And I said, 102-year difference, yet this idea of fragility that we're living in is so real and palpable. And how did we fail this woman? How did we allow her to grow up in abject poverty, coming out of the most successful 4 square miles of Black economic prosperity? When she's 7 years old, it gets destroyed, and we didn't rebuild over the last 100 years a space and a place for her to prosper. We didn't take care of Mother Fletcher. We didn't take care of Uncle Red. We didn't take care of all the Mother Fletchers and all of the Uncle Reds, whether it was Bronzeville in Chicago, whether it's Black Bottom in Paradise Valley in Detroit. We let them put Ford Field on that. And then even right here in Greenwood, I'm looking at the IDL freeway going straight through where the Williams Dreamland Theater used to stand. We didn't take care of Mother Fletcher. And after that experience, I was so filled and so emotional that I go, I just decided to get something to eat. My son was hungry and ended up going down the street. And I look up and I see an Oklahoma State University building. And then I look across the street to the right and I see brand new condos. Then I look over to the left and I see an Oklahoma State or a AAA baseball team stadium. And I see a crane there and a crane there and a crane over there. And you say, what the is going on? Because we know we don't own those cranes. We don't own that baseball team. We don't own that Oklahoma State University facility. And we didn't take care of Mother Fletcher. So I'm going to keep it very brief because I want to hear what everyone else has to say. But fundamentally speaking, we cannot have social justice without economic justice. And I believe truly our local electeds and county officials, county commissioners. I love Tammy Sawyer. I was just with her on my way here. I went through Memphis on our Digital Financial Revolution tour. She introduced me so powerfully to the Memphis community with a wonderful speech. Speaking of truth to power, she is such a powerful, wonderful figure, an elected official. And seeing her on this just fills my heart with joy because you guys are there. And we need you. We have to rebuild our financial infrastructure and take care of our Mother Fletchers and our Uncle Reds. We have to do that. You cannot have social justice without economic justice. And we have to look to the new technologies that are available to do it. Because if we keep looking for the help, it's not coming. It's not coming. It's not coming. It's not coming. We have to be self-sovereign. We have to do it ourselves. We have to figure it out ourselves, leverage decentralized technology and go. Organize and go. Recirculate dollars, recirculate the digital dollar and support each other and go. The old way's not working. It didn't work. It's not gonna work. We have to do this ourselves and together. And I'm ready to do it with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bishop McKenzie. You're on mute.
And I say, praise the Lord. And yes, thank you, Hill Hopper and everyone, Dr. Glory. I'm just excited to be on a panel of diverse leaders. And I applaud all that you do in your various arenas. When we talk about a broken system, it is difficult to remember when it wasn't broke, that it began at a flawed process from the beginning, when you cannot count the people within your borders as whole and only as 3/5, it's flawed. When you talk about inalienable rights that only belong to the people that you choose to belong, it's a flawed system. So maybe perhaps we should ask the question, how do we fix what's broke? Maybe this is the opportunity for us to build it better, than the flawed that it started. We are at a place where it is no longer for the people, of the people, by the people. It is for me, of me, and by me. And that me doesn't include anybody on this Zoom. That me doesn't include anyone on this Zoom. The the absolute determination to destroy the rule of law, the absolute determination to put forth a lie in the midst of truth, not recognizing legitimate authority that has been elected. And even after you fail to investigate not just insurrectionists, but people who were determined to overthrow the country, not destroy the Capitol, not just kill the vice president or whoever else was in that room, but literally to turn the government over, period. It's called a coup. And still, people who've been elected in seats cannot investigate, refuse to investigate, and insist on perpetuating the lie. But literally, we have not been, this is not the first time we've been here. The nation has always gotten stronger on our backs, has always produced from what we produced. And when they couldn't take it, they destroyed it. What they didn't own and couldn't buy, it was taken. And when areas became blighted, we have not been able to build. So not being able to rebuild in Tulsa, and I'll see all y'all in Tulsa tomorrow, not being able to build in Tulsa. What happened to the neighborhoods that were destroyed after Dr. King was murdered? How long did it take for those neighborhoods to be rebuilt? So let me throw another thing on the table. Back in 1944, there was a young girl, last name is Taylor, was walking home from church with some church-going friends. And 7 white men came up beside them in a truck and took young Taylor to an isolated place, raped her, abused her, defamed her, and then tossed her back. The NAACP asked their top investigator to go to that Abbeville, Montgomery place to investigate, and her name was Rosa Parks, which happened to be her father's hometown. And her efforts resulted in the formulation of a committee, and that committee was for equal justice, and that committee became the Montgomery Improvement Association. So then the bus boycott then is seen as the opening salvo for the civil rights movement. But to quote McGuire, in many ways, it was the last act of a long struggle to protect Black women like Taylor. And today, Black women are still the most unprotected in the United States, and I dare say, in the world. So then the social movement, widely described as the civil rights movement, then emerged out of Black women demanding to be protected and control over their bodies and lives, and Black men being killed protecting Black women for trying to protect their bodies, and agencies against rape and assault. And eight decades later, nothing has changed. And so when I saw the image from the Tulsa massacre of a man standing in the middle of the streets with his hands up, what did that remind you of? The same thing last year, the year before last, the last year, year before last, of Black people standing with their hands up, don't shoot. When I saw pictures from Tulsa of bodies lying in the street. What does that remind you of? Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, you can call the roll. Black bodies lying in the street. Every generation must fight for justice and the right to live, and we are no exception. We will not be able to fight from our various silos. Church over here, law over here, the academy over here, yeah, politicians over here, business over here, entrepreneurs over here. We must draw our own circle and come together, and everybody puts their piece of the puzzle on the table until change takes place. I want my granddaughter not to grow up in a flawed system. I want her to grow up in a place where her gifts will make room for her, where she can soar as high and far as she wants to soar without anyone denying her because of her hue or her hair. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. It may begin here, but there's a long road. And I believe with the combined talent on this, in this Zoom and in our various communities, we can help solve the problems that our grandparents were not able to solve.
Thank you so much for those comments. We'll now hear from Lamel McMorris.
Thank you, Dr. Holton, and thank you everyone for this tremendous honor to be a part of this panel. Somewhere sandwiched between the year of 1867 and the years of 1906, I'm honored as well for those men on this line who know what those 2 years mean. But also not only being sandwiched between those two critical years, I hear in the comments that have been made prior to this, Fred Hammond in the background underscoring this discussion, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And when the question of, is this democracy broken, rises, Bishop, my response is maybe not broken, but vulnerable. And so while I also hear Fred Hammond singing in the background of everything that's been said, I also hear the words of Samuel DeWitt Proctor, who reminded us that faith indeed is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. But his point was that we are the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen for our ancestors who never could have imagined a forum like this, who never could have imagined professors like Dr. Glaude, who never could have imagined elected officials at the federal, county, local, state level. And so I raise that to say and to challenge particularly the elected officials at the county level on a couple of notes. From my vantage point in DC, from a legislative perspective, we have to, in an effort to help continue to make this democracy better, but also in the spirit of redressing and repairing historic wrongs, push for HR 1, the For the People Act in Congress. We have to continue to push for HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We have to push for, in the spirit of continuing to make this democracy all that it should be and to repair historic wrongs, we at least should be willing to support HB 40, which is a study of reparations, a study of reparations. But to go a step further in this effort to not just address historic wrongs, but also repair a broken and quite vulnerable democracy, I would submit and lay on the table as an example that which was done in Evanston, Illinois. Local elected officials decided to put forth legislation in the city of Evanston, Illinois. While we know reparations addresses economic development, there are reparations issues and efforts that need to be repaired around criminal justice and economic justice, particularly for you, Brother Hill, being in Greenwood. I also see housing and breaking the wealth gap in housing as a major social justice issue. And while this legislation in the city of Evanston does not solve everything, for a city to at least put forth an effort to repair historic wrongs and discriminatory wrongs through a tangible effort to give grants for home ownership, home repair, home acquisition is a positive step and an example that I hope the National Association of Black County Officials and the National Organization of Black County Officials would see as a model for that which we not only can do at the federal level, but that which we can get done also at the local level. I reserve my time for our colleagues because we have a lot of people that need to speak. Thank you for this great honor. I look forward to the continued discussion.
Thank you, Lamel. And you're speaking right into the vein that all politics are local. It begins with where we live and sleep and have our beings. We'll go to now Supervisor Holly Mitchell.
Dr. Holton, thank you very much for this amazing opportunity to share space and time and conversation with you all. You know, I remember being a little kid and my parents would get excited when Black people appeared on TV and would call everyone down to see whoever Black was on television. Well, that's how I feel on Sunday mornings, Dr. Glaude, when I hear you represent the perspective of all of us on those Sunday morning political shows. And so please know that you make us all proud each and every day. I had to make a conscious decision to wake up every morning and decide that I was not going to be overwhelmed by it all. And I think that's what we as Black people have to do every day. That we are living in a dangerous season, but this isn't new for us, as many of you have talked about. As I heard Brother Harper talk about, and yet we didn't rebuild, I instantly began to think about all of the structural reasons that prevented us, or the structural racism, often government sanctioned racism that took it from us. Names like prison industrial complex, urban renewal, gentrification, all theories in practice, government sanctioned, government funded, that have robbed us and multiple generations of opportunity. And yet I have to make the commitment to myself to wake up every morning and say, I'm not going to be overwhelmed by it all. And so when you ask a question like, is our democracy broken? You know, in my little small brain, I'm like, that is too much, that's overwhelming. All I can do is do what I can do, like Zorba, keeping my belly low to the ground, to continue to create opportunities for Black women and Black people. You know, Polly Murray, if you're not familiar with her, was the first Black Deputy Attorney General in 1945, co-founder of the National Organization for Women. And she said in 1970, if you were to ask a Negro woman what she felt was her greatest accomplishment, she's likely to respond, I survived. And when I think about being a third generation Native Angelino, growing up in the progressive state of California, the 5th largest economy in the world, and the fact that we are still battling core basic rights and fundamental issues impacting Black women, like Black maternal morbidity, an issue I worked with Dr. Marilyn Hill Harper 30 years ago as fellow board members of the California Black Women's Health Project. That's Brother Harper's amazing doctor mother. The fact that we are battling Black maternal morbidity, Black infant mortality and morbidity at rates that have not changed a percentage point in 50 and 60 years. The fact that in the progressive state of California, our Black home ownership rates are lower today in 2021 than they were 60 years ago when housing covenants were still on the law of the land. The fact that we finally were able to get a committee organized and passed into law and signed by the governor to study reparations. The fact that I had to introduce a bill to protect me in the workplace by wearing my hair in its natural state, the Crown Act. The fact that we still have to step up into spaces and introduce laws to protect our basic fundamental rights to deliver babies healthy, for as Black women to survive childbirth, is why I have to wake up every morning and make the conscious decision that I'm not going to be overwhelmed by it all. And that I'm going to continue to do the work now at the local level of government, representing 2 million people in the most populous county in the country, to the best of my ability, to introduce basic, guaranteed basic income, the largest county that will confront this issue. Not a new concept. Dr. King talked about it in the Poor People's Campaign of 60 years ago, but to continue to destigmatize and not criminalize poverty, and to trust that Black women, if given an additional $1,000 a month, will do right by it by investing in themselves and their children. Basic humanity. Those are the things I think that we as local elected officials and local leaders and activists can and must do, while Professor Glaude talks to us about, can this democracy be saved? That's too big a question for me. I will be the first to confess, because I have to wake up every day and make the commitment that I will not be overwhelmed by the enormity of it all, and do what I can to defend the basic fundamental human rights of Black people, first in LA County, in the state of California, and this country that we all know we built. Thank you for the opportunity to share time with you today.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Mitchell. Now we'll hear from Commissioner Tammy Sawyer, followed by Commissioner Van Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Holton. I wish I had the fortitude of Supervisor Mitchell, because Lord knows I need to have that same agreement with myself. As was mentioned, we are in the middle of the remains of Nathan Bedford Forrest being removed from Memphis, from Health Sciences Park, which my colleague and friend, Commissioner Van Turner, owns and administers. And we have had just yesterday a incredible day of assault at the hands of verbal assault at the hands of those who consider themselves neo-Confederates. But this is something that I've been experiencing as a Black woman in activism and in politics for 4 years. And so when people ask me, is our democracy broken? I go back to the original statement. When was democracy whole? That got all the snaps for me. That resonated with me so deeply. When W.E.B. Du Bois and others met and created the Niagara movement, they had a hope and a belief that America would fully see the Black man as a complete individual, one who was a political being, one who was a cultural being, one who was equal to the white man. And even though women weren't included in that hope, at that time, the Niagara movement, so much money was poured into the demolition of that movement to the point where they never had another convention, another meeting. And over time, since 1905, when that movement was created, we have tried over and over again to build on this broken ground of the democracy of America. We run for offices, we get elected. I sit on a body of 13 and we still can't move the needle, even though we are majority Democratic and majority Black, on what is needed economically, educationally, and socially for Black people in Shelby County, Tennessee, the largest Black county in the state. And so when I think about is America broken, I say a resoundingly yes. And what is needed to fix it is for us to imagine for ourselves what a Black America looks like, what democracy looks like for us. And I think so many of us have said that today, that it's time for us to look inward. It's time for us to stop asking for permission. It's time for us to stop reaching across the aisle. I no longer believe in the Kumbaya chorus. We are only going to save ourselves if we do it ourselves.
Good evening. I would like to amen and thank my colleague, Commissioner Surrey. We actually sit next to each other at the Board of Commissioners. So you see how lucky I am to glean all that wisdom and knowledge from my colleague. I also want to recognize our chairman. He's actually on as a participant, Chairman Eddie Jones, and just want to acknowledge him. He's our leader here in Memphis and Shelby County on the Board of Commissioners. I think when you look at whether or not democracy is broken, and I understand we're saying, was it ever whole? But you know, what put me in this mindset is that there are three things you have to do if you have a broken bone. The first thing you have to do is you have to reset the bone. So we have to reset the bone of democracy. And I'm talking about healing. Where do we go from here? You have to reset the bone of democracy. And I think you do that through the judiciary. So it's no secret why there has been an attack on the judiciary and why we've seen an effort to appoint so many conservative federal judges. Case in point, when you have the 1965 Voting Rights Act gutted, that means that the pre-clearance qualification was taken away. Pre-clearance meant in order for you to do anything with respect to voting, you had to get clearance from the Department of Justice. This was implemented in the 60s to stop what was going on in the 60s. Well, when the Supreme Court and other federal courts gutted the 65 Voting Rights Act, you see what we are experiencing now in Georgia. And as our chairman and leader just said, what we just saw down in Texas. So when our Article 3 judges, and those are the federal judges at the district level, the appellate level, and at the Supreme Court, are conservative, have a political agenda, they enact policies which erode and deteriorate the very basic bone and structure of our democracy, which is the sacred right to vote. So in order to reset that bone, I think we have to take a look at our judiciary system, and we have to go about the process of aligning judges with what we need to do in order to effectuate those policies which will affect our everyday lives, reset the bone. Next, you have to wrap up the bone. And I think we know that you wrap that bone up with the cast. After you set the bone, you have to put the cast on the bone. I think we do that with cooperative economics. I listened to Mr. Harper when he was here in Memphis, and I've listened to so many others who've given this speech. The dollar does not turn enough in the Black community. How are we ever going to rebuild our community? How are we ever going to dig ourselves out of the shadow of 1921 if we do not really emphasize cooperative economics and turning that Black dollar in our community multiple times before it leaves our community? In my own community, in District 12, when I go to the grocery store, no one that looks like me owns the grocery store. No one that looks like me owns the dry cleaners. No one that looks like me owns the gas station. In essence, everyone in my community where I work and play and shop does not look like me. And that's an issue. And that's where we are in America. And I would say to all those here that are looking and all those who are participating, if you look in your own neighborhoods, for the most part, it'll be the same thing. So in order to really heal that bone, we have to wrap it up. And I think we do that with cooperative economics. And we have to make sure we are focusing in on making sure that that dollar turns in our community. And I think lastly, it's going to take time, because time has to heal the wound. And we extend what we're doing today through our youth. It's no good if we sit here and we talk the talk and we walk the walk, and yet another generation does not learn from what we're doing. And we have to redo this all over again. We're having to redo so many things now, and we cannot sustain ourselves if we allow each generation to have to rebuild, each generation to start from the beginning. So we have to create a way to distill this information down to our youth, to get it in the classrooms, and to make sure that education is holistic, and to make sure that when they learn in school, they're learning about the tools that they would need to continue our struggle and to continue what we're doing this evening. I think we mentioned James Baldwin, Dr. Glaude, at the beginning. Baldwin is famous for saying in 63, the fire the next time. We all know that's from the biblical story. God destroyed the earth the first time with the great flood. The second time they said the fire will come the next time. And so if we don't do these things that we have to do, I think there will be a fire in this country, and it would burn, and it would burn it down. So I'm of the opinion that we are the ones that have to start this process of healing democracy, of fixing this broken bone of democracy. And I think we do that through the judicial system, through cooperative economics, and really teaching these lessons to our youth. Thank you.
Well, we have certainly heard a mouthful. Professor Glaude, I'm going to turn to you with our opening question. And throughout your book, it's mentioned often of the role of the witness. What does it mean for us to live as and take on the role of witness in the world and the nation that we find ourselves in?
Thank you so much for the question, and I'll be brief. For Baldwin to bear witness is to give voice to the suffering that cannot speak. Right. So, what does it mean to shed light on that which people willfully ignore? Right? Because every time something happens in this country, folk clutch their pearls and they ask themselves the question: is this America? And you're like, well, where have you been? Right. And so the idea of bearing witness is to tell the truth about what's happening in the world, in our communities, to tell the truth about what police are doing, to tell the truth about what politicians are doing, to tell the truth about those Black elites that are selling us out, to tell the truth about why we are in the condition that we're in, and to understand that telling that truth comes with a certain kind of responsibility and consequence. So we have to bear witness by allowing the suffering to speak. That's how I would answer that. Yeah.
Any of the panelists? Bearing witness is a powerful tool. Bishop?
Well, I would, I love what you said, Dr. Floyd. And when we talk about the power of the witness, it took me immediately back to the 17-year-old girl
Darnella.
who held her cell phone and the world watched George Floyd die. That's holding the witness, because if she hadn't taken the picture, you don't know what the body cams would have shown. Right. If the body cams were turned on, the footage lost, people wouldn't believe. There would be all kinds of miscommunication. But that took a whole lot of courage to stand there and listen to the threats and turn your camera off and other things that we don't know what they said to her. She bore witness to this man's death. And so a part of that, a part of bearing witness is that that was just a snapshot. It is the other witnesses who haven't spoken yet. We've only seen what happened to George Floyd. We have not seen the other things that have taken place, are taking place, may taking place, because there is no witness.
Yes, thank you for that.
Can I comment on that very quickly, Dr. Holton?
Absolutely.
Because as I listen, I also thought about Brian Stevenson in his first book, talking about proximity. And bearing witness also requires that you are proximate, that you are in close proximity to whatever the issue is. And I think all of us have the opportunity and responsibility to be proximate to our people, to the challenges we collectively are experiencing every day. And when you bear witness and you are proximate, it gives you a deeper level of understanding. We on a cellular level, we feel and experience the pain, and therefore must rise above it to come out to identify and fight for and defend for solutions. So I think it's bearing witness and putting ourselves proximate to these challenges to help us all collectively overcome.
Yes. So I want to talk about, when I first heard the saying, let's make America great again, I didn't really think that Mr. Trump was intelligent enough to posit that in an inclusive way. And it reminded me in reading, Professor, when you spoke about the 1980 presidential campaign of Ronald Reagan. And now in my mind, I remember, and he went to the show of Mississippi. And that is the first place that he coined that phrase. And so when you think about the cycles of life that we go through over and over and over and over again, the word of God says there's not a new thing under the sun, but it calls for us to bear witness and be attentive to what has transpired before. What does that mean for where we are right now?
I want to, of course, I don't want to hog the conversation, but I think this is really important. So the phrase "make America great again" has to be located with Reagan, because we tell the story of Trumpism as if it goes from Trump to George Wallace to Strom Thurmond, maybe Pat Buchanan in between, right? We've tried to read Trump as the kind of racist demagogue and not understand that his lineage is at the heart of the current contemporary iteration of the Republican Party. That this is, in fact, an element of Reaganism making itself known, metastasizing and overwhelming, right, the body politic in some ways. And I think it's really important because Hillary Clinton made this mistake. She tried to separate Trump from the Republican Party. And what has been revealed over these last 5 years or so is that this is at the heart of that particular political ideology, right? And I think understanding that will give us a sense of how the underbelly of American politics has in some ways been predicated upon, excuse that verb, has drawn on a set of assumptions about whiteness that has in some ways galvanized a particular segment of the country, right? White grievance, white resentment has been the fuel of our politics since the 1960s. And unless we understand that, we're going to be tinkering around the edges. We're not going to get to the heart of the matter. And I think that's really important.
I think one thing to add is one of the reasons for this white anger that Dr. Glaude just mentioned is that, European immigrants came to this country and were sold the belief that their proximity to whiteness would allow them to ascend in this country. And to Dr. Glau's point about the 60s, as these European immigrants just get a taste of that financial power, that assimilation, their kids stop getting called slurs based on what country they're from, their accents start to go away. We roll up and say, okay, enough is enough. You're going to integrate these schools. You're going to, let us shop in your shopping marts. We're going to be able to compete for these jobs. We're going to go to your colleges. And whiteness is not just enough anymore. But they gave up their heritage. They're no longer Lithuanian. They're no longer Hungarian. They're no longer any of these things. And we have Blackness, and the Latinos have their brownness, and they're lost in this pot of whiteness and assimilation that doesn't allow them to be unique and doesn't allow them, puts them in this history of racism and violence in America. I always tell people to read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair because it documents very, very well, almost in a litany, like a biblical litany, the ways that the Europeans assimilated into whiteness in this country and how the Blacks and the Latinx, then Hispanic people were left out of that assimilation. But that is why we're strong, because we had to fend for ourselves. And so some of that anger is they were sold a belief that whiteness would make them great. The great again that they're looking for is when whiteness was great. And whiteness is no longer considered the greatest or greatness in this country. And that's where a lot of that rage is coming from.
Dr. Holton, if I can, Commissioner Sawyer and Dr. Glau's comments remind me of both the challenge and the opportunity. Dr. King told this story about how he would always be in jail, and he was in jail so much that he started having conversations with some of the jailers, and he started talking to them. And he said, well, he asked one brother, he said, well, how much do you make? White jailer. He told the jailer told him how much he made, and Dr. King said, man, you need to be out here with us. We're on the same side. And I think, and the point I'm trying to make here is that Commissioner Sawyer especially, there are differences. And yes, whiteness has been cast in a certain way, but at some point, we have to return to educate people to let them know that when we get down past race and we get to fundamental issues around economics, around healthcare disparities, housing disparities, wage disparities, the overall wealth gap, that there's not a lot that separates us. We've allowed individuals to racialize these matters, but when we get down to it, I think Dr. King had a point when we start really talking to these individuals, particularly working class whites and others. There's not a lot that separates us, and we actually will determine that we're on the same side.
I'll jump in here. Oh, real quick. I just want to respond to my brother Lamel. I think that we've had that belief for a long time. In fact, many economics professors always tried to, I was the econ major in undergrad, and I would get into argument after argument with them trying to explain to me that the free market actually usurps race, that the free market would take care of the problem because it's an inefficiency in the market system, and therefore it would take care. But the truth of the matter fundamentally is, and the example I always use, when it used to be when I was in New York, and even if I had the money in my hand, that free market of New York City taxis, which is about as free market as you can find, would drive right by me. Race and racism is more powerful than money, even though they try to convince us it's not, because it's inextricably linked with money. And that's why, because the greatest wealth transfer in the history of this country was 400 years of slave trade. And if you were despicable enough to have the appetite and the willingness to hold people as chattel slaves or even participate tangentially in an industry that supported the holding of slaves, like all these northern folks that founded all those Ivy League schools and all the people that became, you know, at that time, the quote unquote billionaires like Brown, where I attended. And the simple fact of the matter is, they will allow themselves to be poor and to be marginalized as long as they can keep that whiteness. And therefore, the idea of trying to convince them otherwise is an effort in futility until you prove them wrong by building up your own economic base. Now, what happens is, just like happened in Greenwood, you do that really well, they're gonna come and try to take it, tear it down, put a highway through it, put Ford Field on top of it, do all sorts of eminent domain, all these different types of strategies. That's why self-sovereignty, recirculation dollars, Brother Van Turner spoke about, I believe is critical. And I'll tell you why. I'll just use that, my little taxi cab analogy about technology. When young Mr. Travis, who invented Uber, invented that, he didn't think he was actually solving a race problem. Decentralized technology has the opportunity to solve the problem in many of these problems, because all we want as Black folks, we never want anything extra, we just want fair. And the beautiful thing about that blip is it doesn't know that I'm Black. Now you could say, oh, it knows what zip code you're in, and there's fewer cars in the zip code, so it takes longer for you to get an Uber. But the point is, a car shows up. So if we're able to own our own tech, to get our own code, to actually link each other, and then step out of the system, we would be able to have more self-sovereignty, self-determination, economic determination, social justice determination, et cetera, et cetera. I want to fund, through tokenism, Black private police forces in our communities. The rich white folks have them in their gated communities. Let's have them in ours. So the first call is not the police. The first call is our private policing association. The only way we can do that is we can afford it.
And it goes back to the power of economics and money that brings up Thomas Frank's book on What's the Matter with Kansas, where some of the poorest counties in America are in the state of Kansas. And yet they are staunch conservative Republican voters who vote against their own self-interest because they live from a philosophy that I'd rather be poor and white than to be Black and poor. A phenomena that has continued to this present day. Race is such a linchpin in our nation that there are those who would want to be anything other than Black. And I'm convinced that Dr. King was killed because of his stance on poverty, not civil rights, but poverty, because there are more poor white people than poor Black people. And if they all banded together, where would we be as a nation?
Well, this makes what Reverend Barber is trying to do with the Poor People's Campaign so important.
That's
Right? It makes it so important. And I think we have a debate, that we have a conversation that Brother Hill has just laid out, and Brother Lamel has kind of inaugurated in so many ways. And I think all of us might need to sit down with Heather McGee's new book, The Sum of Us, and kind of think through what she's trying to do strategically there, so that we might be able to kind of grapple with this question in an interesting sort of way. Also, just as another citation, W.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. He's talking about the wages of whiteness. He's also talking about this moment in the US context where you have the Free Soil Party and abolition, the moment in which we're trying to abolish slavery, and the moment in which we're talking about white workers and land, but those two movements don't come together. And so there is a reason in this country why this hasn't happened. It has a historical lineage that we can tell the story, that can give us a thick account of why what Reverend Barber is trying to do, along with Reverend Jean Theo Harris, is so important and so difficult at the same time. We
have a question from one of our attendees. How do you propose addressing the right to life leverage the conservatives use to bully so many, including staunch Christian Blacks, to vote against their own interests?
Mm. Oh, I was about to reach for another book, but we can go. I'll let somebody else talk.
Well, you know, Dr. Go ahead and reach for the other book. And, you know, I'll just simply say that we allow too many people to choose our issues. And that's not the only issue. There are other moral issues that we need to raise when we get to certain points. Poverty is a moral issue. Unfair sentencing is a moral issue. We talk about gerrymandering and all the other issues that you brought up, mothers and their babies, all of that. But we allow people to raise hot button issues that divide us and keep us talking about everything else but what the deal is at hand. And that now, Dr. Gloyd, you got the book, open it, and then let's go.
No, I was just saying there's a citation. Part of what we do is tell the story. Remember, I said we have to tell the truth to break through as much as we can the noise. And there's a wonderful book by Sarah Posner, Posner, entitled Unholy. Unholy. How white Christian nationalists powered the Trump presidency and the devastating legacy they left behind. And she tells the story how the question of the right to life wasn't at the center of white evangelicalism from the beginning. How it emerged, how it became the central issue. And so once we tell a story about how this was leveraged for political purposes, maybe we can then break the back, decenter it in interesting sorts of ways, because people are selling us, as my wife would say from Jamaica, they're selling us a 6 for a 9 all the time, you see. And so part of what we have to do is re-narrate, right? So that we can open up more space, a different kind of space to imagine our politics in a different sort of way, if that makes sense.
And as we tell the truth, I hope that we will expand upon that and help educate our brothers and sisters that it's those same political operatives who never cast a single vote to support the fetus once it exits its mother's body. And so it's those same people that will never vote for early care and education, healthcare services, housing, access to food, anything that feeds and nourishes that same fetus that they are so concerned about pre-delivery.
Now I'd like to add here too, the way that I really approach politics is put aside all party politics, all philosophies. And when I walk into the doors of the county commission, the first thought that I have is what's going to benefit our community the most? What's going to benefit the Black citizens in District 12 and throughout the city of Memphis the most? And I think that transcends all that we really need to do. So, and when you have that philosophy in mind, and when you can really get that out to the electorate, I think you can kind of navigate through these issues, which are issues, but I think the sole focus that we have to look at is what is really affecting our community and what is impacting our community through the budget, through voting laws, through how funds are being allocated, where are the funds going for infrastructure, for new businesses, so on and so forth. And I think that's really the core of what we have to do in politics. And that's what it is. Really, politics is the allocation of taxpayer dollars and resources. And that's what we have to do as commissioners. That's really our #1 job. And we have to solely focus on steering those resources into our community. And when you are a voter, you have to go and vote what's going to be the #1 vote to make sure that the resources are coming back in my community. Because if you're putting people in office who are here, there, and everywhere and not focused on the community, then, you know, that's a wasted vote. And so that's sort of how I stay focused when these issues come up, because they come up all the time, and we have to address those issues appropriately. But our core issue as elected officials, and in my mind as a voter, when you cast that vote, when you go and put that vote down, is that vote showing dividends for your community? If it's not, it's a wasted vote, and you have a wasted person in office.
Yes. So I want to throw out some terms, particularly to our county officials: urban renewal, digital divide, redlining. How do you address these issues in a way that when you lift the least of these, you're lifting a whole community? How is it that these tools, these instruments, I mean, Greenwood is a prime example. You bulldoze through a community under the guise of urban renewal, but there's no place for those who need a place. And just throw in affordable housing and some other things. What do you do?
Well, as a current, I'm trying to make sure I share space. So, but as a current county official, I'll just say that for us, one thing that comes up very frequently is pilots or tax incentives for developers, right? And so very often we get these urgent proposals. We're building a new, mixed use development downtown. It's going to be high speed Wi-Fi. Y'all have to sign off on these bonds in 15 minutes. I mean, was it that one commissioner attorney, they gave us like a week to sign off. And we're like, where's the minority investment plan? Where's the MWBE numbers? Who have you partnered with? And 2 years later, they've not signed any MWBE partners. They've removed all of the low-income housing from the downtown south side of Memphis. And everything that is happening in that development area. Just last week, they requested additional sheriff's deputies to patrol during the weekend because the kids are driving too fast through downtown and it's too loud. But the Grizzlies play downtown, right? And Memphis is one of several cities that has settled with almost every major banking institution. Now, I know they've all combined and changed name, but if you think about those original parent institutions, every single one redlined in Memphis, right? Very similar to what happened in Chicago and to what Ta-Nehisi Coates writes about in the case for for reparations, right? And so here we're seeing that we can't even say to the developers, what's your plan to reinvest in the community? Or else we're being told we're they flipped it on us. They say we're anti-development, we're anti-growth, we don't want to see the community get anything. When we ask, what's the community receiving? And so I said this today in our budget meeting, we have to re-educate the community because they've been bamboozled, not to quote our dear brother Malcolm, but they've been bamboozled on the language. And so they're hearing, oh, there will be a tax rate increase and they don't want that. But really we're taking the taxes back where they should be from where they were reduced to benefit white business owners. So we have to re-educate our people so that they understand the things that are happening so that they can support a tax increase that won't hurt our communities, but will make sure that the wealthy are paying their fair share, so that when they hear us saying we're not going to support a pilot, they won't come back and say to us, oh, you killed downtown business. They'll realize, no, you supported low-income homes.
Dr. Holton, I know you posed this to the commissioners, but also want to submit that it's not just incumbent upon the elected officials and the county officials to go back into the community and, as Rick Ross said, build back the block. I know there's some commissioners from Cook County where I'm sitting tonight talking here in Chicago, where as a citizen and a child of my neighborhood of Woodlawn, I saw the same vacant lots, the same blighted buildings, and I decided to go right at the historic process of redlining and launch greenlining realty using the Cook County Land Bank, Commissioner Sawyer, and building new homes on vacant lots and rehabbing blighted properties. So regular citizens, children and sons and daughters of these neighborhoods can partner with county and local officials and their programs to rebuild the neighborhood as well, and to go right at gentrification, affordable housing, and the historic practice of redlining as well.
There's a lot for us to consider and think about as we move forward. And this is just the precursor, the prelude to our economic development conference coming up in September, where we will continue to explore, is our democracy dying? And what will we do about it? And at this time, I want to turn the program over to Derek Albert.
Thank you, Dr. Holton. Really appreciate you. Let me just say that tonight came about because every day we watch MSNBC, we watch CNN, and we see what's happening. We feel it every single day that, you know, people are constantly trying to take America and make it two Americas. And we live in two Americas every single day. And Dr. King once said, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And if we can't speak about what's going on and bring our friends together and make something happen and something positive, then what are we doing? This is not about me or my generation, in my opinion. It's about my children and the next generation. If we don't stand up and fight and do what's right to help them, I think we will be a lost generation, and we can't afford to do that. Let me thank the people in here. You know, whenever you want to put on a good program, the first thing you do is look in your Rolodex or your contact list, and you find your best friends who understand the issue or the issues. And so as we were putting this together, the first person I thought about was Dr. Eddie Glaude. I said, man, this brother is on fire. And everybody on this call know, I generally know almost everybody in the country. I can reach them within 5 minutes. And I'm like, man, what am I gonna do? I don't know this brother. I mean, I see him every day. I admire this brother. He's doing this thing. And I mean, Dr. Glaude, you're killing it every single day. So I said, who do I know? So all of a sudden I get this call, and C.A. Houston called me several times. I didn't return his phone call. He beat me up for not calling him and saying happy birthday this year. You know, and our birthday is only like 2 or 3 days apart. And so all of a sudden, you know, I was talking to him. I picked up the phone. I said, man, I'm trying to reach this brother, Eddie Glaude. And he said, man, I practically raised the guy. I said, what? So there goes our 3 degrees of separation. So he said, man, I can call Eddie right now and make this happen. And Mr. Houston, thank you so much for doing that. I truly appreciate you. Then I got him Rolodex, and, you know, if you know good people, you get the people out the contact list. And the second thing you do, you call a good alpha man. So I actually called several good alpha men. I called my brother Hill and LaBelle. I said, hey, man, we got to put this together and make this work. He said, hey, no doubt about it. And so then at that point, you know, you go around and Rolodex then say, well, where do I have some business? I got to call my elected officials where I do business. So at that point, I said, let me call Tammy and Van. And I know they're doing some wonderful things down in Shelby County. And the chairman is always admirable and say, okay, brother, I'm going to let you handle this. And you can never have a good town hall or a good meeting without religion. And Bishop McKenzie, you are phenomenal. We could not have had this tonight without you, your leadership, your prayer, and your excellent words. Thank you so much for all that you do and giving us that inspiration and encouragement to continue to move onward and upward. And last, what I will do, I want to thank all of our staff that helped out tonight. Dr. Holton, thank you for everything that you've done today to make this program a success. Our staff that was here tonight, Be Inspired Global, thank you. Our interns, Isaac Taylor, Christy Fontaine, and my daughter Tanae is an intern with NABCO this year. Can you believe that? And so I want to thank everybody that helped us out. Last, our chairman and president of the National Association of Black County Officials, who's going to be speaking after me. Rodney, I know you've been a councilman, you've been a state senator, you guys are facing a lot of things in Texas. I challenge you as the president of NABCO to get a resolution and have all of our Black county officials, whether elected or appointed around this nation, come together, put a resolution, send it to those 2 senators that are holding things up for us, and put a demand on them and make sure that they stand up and stand out for us right now, because we need them. The woman in Arizona would not be elected if it were not for brown and black people in this nation. And right now she can't turn her back or say no. It's up to NABCO as the political arm of this group to step up and make sure that they know, the US Senate knows where we stand. And I hope that we can get that done as soon as possible, because it's time out for us living in two Americas. If I walk down the street with a shotgun today during the middle of a riot, I'll be shot by the police. A white guy can walk down with the rifle after shooting two people and get me given a glass of water. That's unacceptable. We have got to do something about it. Thank you so much. I thank all of my friends for coming out. Supervisor Mitchell, you're phenomenal. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Tammy Sawyer, you know, I've known you since you was a baby. Thank you so much. Look at you now, so proud of you. Matter of fact, I think you need to get that PhD over at Princeton with Dr. Glaw. There you go, do it, there you go. And Lamel, I know you're working on a PhD. We got Dr. Harper here, everybody. Thank you so much, Mr. Houston. Again, thank you for everything that you do. I appreciate all of you. The Honorable Rodney Ellis.
Derek, I want to start by thanking you. Only you could have had the ability to pull this together. You know, Roy Brooks and I both deep in the heart of Texas, and it was named after Sam Houston. Dang, this city must be named after you, man. Who else could have gotten Eddie? Who could have gotten America's intellectual to be on here tonight? Hill Harper. I mean, the two of them, your celebrity status and your intellect helped get so many Black county officials all around this country on the phone. And you got some power here. Lamel, you know, strategist extraordinaire. Holly, you know, I know you be president at LA board. You know, everything we do in any other county is dwarfed by Los Angeles. I mean, I thought Roy told me, man, get out of the Senate. You've been there long enough messing with those people. Why don't you go on and go after that county seat? And I looked at the budget. I said, well, I guess we controlling about $5 billion if you count everything. And then I called Holly up and say, Holly, guess what I'm doing? She's still in the Senate. I said, 5 people, we controlling $5 billion. She said, we got 5. Our budget's 40 billion, or is it 50 now? $50 billion. But it's amazing. So much is going on in Memphis. You know, Dr. King may have died there, but he opened the door for so many bright intellectuals. Tammy, I'm just so proud of you and Van. Look, the message was, is our democracy broken? I think you got the answer. I guess we could have added again. If you read Eddie's books, you know we created this country. Our ancestors created Western civilization. This has been a hell of a week, Hill. Tuesday was the 1-year anniversary of somebody putting their foot on one of my constituents' neck because they had the ability to do it. And so many people around the country have given lip service to all kinds of reforms. And for most of them, reform has been just a 6-letter word. So here's my closing thought to our colleagues who are on the line. I'm gonna close it this way. When Ann Richards, you remember Ann, she's so witty. Didn't she have a way with words? I went to New York once to see my daughter, and I went to dinner and had went to a play with Ann Richards. She said, Rodney, stay over, fly out later tomorrow. I want you to see my office. I went to her office. She's in a skyscraper. She walked me to my car. People yelling on the streets, Ann, I saw you on Larry King Live. I said, Governor, you got it made. Girl, you looking good. You in your right mind. I heard you and Governor Cuomo made $1 million off of that Doritos ad during the Super Bowl. I said, Governor, if you had your life to live over again, is there anything you do different? She got all serious, teary-eyed, and I'm thinking, dang, I called her girl. Now I got to go through this. We're friends. She calls me boy. I just said girl. I forgot to say governor. She said, Rodney, there were people I trusted, people who gave me money. people on my staff, close allies, who told me, Governor, you push the envelope as far as you can. Wait until your second term. Then Derek, she said, Senator, I wouldn't have waited until the second term if I could live my life again. So for all of these elected officials, lobbyists, council members, I put this out. When I saw you had Eddie and Hill on here, man, I put it out to all of them. Whatever power you have, use it while you have it. Don't wait till the second term. Good night and thank you. All right.
One last thing before we leave. Everyone that was here tonight, you will be receiving a copy. If you give Helen your address, we will be sending you a copy of Dr. Glau's book, Begin Again. And also at our conference, I'd like for us, Helen, to purchase those books to put in all of our gift bags for all of our registers for the conference this fall. And hopefully we can get Dr. Glau back again at another time and tune in. We will be doing more of these over the next several months, and we look forward to having you again. Thank you all so much, Dr. Glau, Hill Harper, Lamel, Bishop, Tammy, Van, Commissioner, Holly Mitchell, Chairman Brooks, Mr. Houston, Helen, and Rodney. Thank you all so much and good night.